The Arizona sun had barely cleared the Catalina Mountains when Margaret Callahan's weathered Ford Ranger rolled into the gravel lot of Copper Valley shooting range. The truck was older than most of the weapons inside. Its blue paint faded to the color of old denim rust, blooming around the wheel wells like desert flowers after rain. She turned off the engine, sat there for a moment. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, spotted with age, trembling slightly. Not from fear, never from fear. Just the slow betrayal of a body that had carried her through 76 years and wasn't quite ready to admit it was tired. Through the windshield, she could see the range building, low-slung concrete American flags snapping in the morning wind, the kind of place that smelled like Hop's number 9 solvent and old coffee, a place where men came to remember what their hands used to do, what their eyes used to see. Maggie opened the door. The hinges protested. Everything protested these days. She wore a thick cardigan sweater despite the warming day, hand-knitted, in a pattern her late husband Jack had called grandmother chic, with that smile that meant he was teasing, but also meant he loved her. The sweater was too warm, but it hid the tremor in her shoulders, made her look softer, smaller, less threatening. That was the point. Her hands moved to the truck bed, pulling out a battered hard case. The kind that had seen decades of use, covered in faded stickers from ranges across the country. Quantico, Pendleton, 29 Palms. Places where Marines learned to put bullets exactly where they needed to go. The case wasn't heavy, but she moved slowly anyway, shuffling toward the entrance with the careful gait of someone who'd learned that falling at 76 meant months of recovery, not days. The parking lot was already busy. A row of lifted trucks, all black or desert tan, sporting bumper stickers about Second Amendment rights and Semper Fi. Good men, probably. The kind who still stood when a woman entered a room, who still called people sir and ma'am. But parked near the entrance, taking up 3 spaces like they owned the place, sat a brand new Ram TRX, $50,000 murder truck, immaculate, never seen dirt. 4 young men leaned against it, decked out in tactical gear, so new it still had the factory creases. Plate carriers with no plates, drop leg holsters hanging too low, ballistic sunglasses worn indoors even though the sun was still climbing. They looked like soldiers. They looked like warriors. They looked like exactly the kind of men who'd never actually been to war. Maggie shuffled past them, kept her eyes down. Just an old woman, invisible, the way old women were supposed to be. Jesus, Dutch, one of them said, loud enough to carry. You letting anyone shoot here now? That lady looks like she's about to break a hip just carrying that case. Laughter, the kind that wasn't quite mean but wasn't quite kind either. Maggie didn't turn, pushed through the glass door. The familiar smell hit her immediately. Gun oil, powder residue, strong coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. The smell of purpose. Behind the counter stood Vivian Clark, 26 years old, blonde ponytail, pulled back, wearing a Copper Valley polo shirt and a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd been dealing with the tactical crew for an hour already. You could see it in the tightness around her mouth. Morning, Mrs. Callahan, Vivian said, and the warmth in her voice was real. Your regular lane, lane 7 if it's available. For you always. Vivian's fingers moved across the keyboard. Behind her, through the window into the range itself, Maggie could see Winston Dutch Holloway, the rangemaster, 60 years old, former Marine Scout sniper, barrel-chested, silver-haired, wearing the same canvas vest he'd worn for 20 years. He looked up, caught Maggie's eye through the glass, nodded once. The kind of nod that said, I see you. I remember. Dutch had been one of hers. 19 years old when she taught him at Quantico in 1985. Cocky then, humble now. That's what good training did. It replaced arrogance with competence. The front door banged open again. The 4 young men swaggered in, bringing noise with them. The leader was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of jawline that suggested good genetics in a gym membership. Garrett Breckenridge. She'd heard him introduce himself to Vivian earlier, making it sound like the name should mean something. Vivian, he said, leaning on the counter in a way that invaded her space without quite crossing a line. We need lanes 1 through 4, setting up some CQB drills, dynamic movement. Probably gonna get loud. His friends laughed. Thaddeus Montgomery, built like a linebacker. Colton Ashford, baby-faced despite the tactical beard. Preston Drake, quiet but watching everything with pale blue eyes. Sir, I have you down for lanes 1 and 2, Vivian said, keeping her voice level. That's what you reserved. Yeah, but we need 4. You got all these empty lanes. Garrett gestured around. What's the problem? The problem is other people reserve those lanes. Other people? Garrett glanced around the empty waiting area. You mean Grandma over there? He pointed at Maggie. She was sitting on the wooden bench slowly pulling items from her case. A worn 1911 pistol. Government model. The bluing was gone, worn down to bare steel from decades of holster wear. The grip tape was peeling. It looked like something that belonged in a museum, not a shooting range. Maggie's hands trembled as she handled it. Thick glasses perched on her nose, the kind that magnified her eyes and made her look confused. Uncertain. Thaddeus snorted. Lady probably needs help just loading the magazine. Gentlemen, Vivian said, and there was steel underneath the politeness now. You have your lanes. Please proceed to the range floor. Garrett held up his hands in mock surrender. All right. Don't get worked up. He turned to his friends, lowering his voice just enough that it still carried. Probably her time of the month. They pushed through into the range itself. Maggie heard them claiming lanes 1 through 4 anyway, spreading their gear across benches that other people had paid for. Heard the distinct sound of magazines being slapped into Glock pistols. The aggressive racking of slides. They were burning daylight, making noise, announcing their presence to anyone who'd listen. Maggie stood, picked up her case. The tremor in her hands made the pistol rattle slightly against the foam padding. Mrs. Callahan, Vivian said quietly, I'm sorry about them. Don't be, dear. I've dealt with worse. Maggie pushed through the door onto the range floor. The sound hit immediately, not the crack of controlled fire, but the rapid bang, bang, bang of men trying to prove something. Shooting fast, hitting slow. Lane 7 was at the far end, away from the noise. She shuffled toward it, moving with that careful elderly gait, each step deliberate. As she passed Lane 4, Garrett looked up from loading his magazine. Stopped. Stared. Hey, he called out. Ma'am, you sure you're in the right place? Maggie paused, turned slowly, adjusting her glasses. Excuse me. The bingo hall's 2 blocks down. This is a gun range. He wasn't being cruel. Not exactly. Just stating what he saw as obvious truth. Old woman, shaking hands, confused look. His friends were watching now, grins starting to form. I know where I am, young man. It's just, that pistol looks pretty heavy, and I saw your hands shaking. Just concerned about safety, you know. Garrett's voice had that tone, the one that pretended to be helpful while really being condescending. Maggie looked at him, really looked at him, saw the expensive plate carrier. The Glock 19 Gen 5 with the aftermarket trigger, the custom holster, the ballistic sunglasses that cost $300 and provided exactly 0 tactical advantage indoors. Saw the way he stood, weight on his heels, shoulders tense. A man trying to look dangerous instead of being dangerous. I'll manage, she said quietly. Yeah, but Garrett glanced at his friends. They were watching, waiting. He had an audience now. Look, no disrespect, but maybe you should stick to something smaller. A .22 maybe. Less recoil. I've shot this pistol for 53 years. I think I'll be fine. 53 years, Preston spoke up for the first time. Bullshit. Women couldn't even... He stopped, caught himself. But the implication hung in the air. Maggie smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind that came from hearing the same doubt for 5 decades. Women couldn't even what son silence. Even Garrett looked uncomfortable now. Dutch Holloway appeared from the rangemaster's booth, moved between them with the easy authority of someone who'd broken up more than his share of confrontations. Gentlemen, Mrs. Callahan, everyone have what they need. Yeah, Dutch, we're good, Garrett said. Just making sure Grandma here doesn't hurt herself. Dutch's jaw tightened. Mrs. Callahan is a regular. She doesn't need supervision. Come on, man, look at her. Those hands are shaking so bad she can barely hold the gun. Someone needs to... How about a bet, Maggie said. The range went quiet. Even the sound of brass hitting concrete seemed to stop. Garrett turned. What, a bet? Maggie's voice was soft, dry leaves on pavement. You seem confident in your abilities, and convinced of my lack thereof. So let's make it interesting. Thaddeus laughed. You want to bet with us? I do. Maggie shuffled to the nearest bench, set down her gun case, pulled out a worn wallet from her cardigan pocket, counted out 10 $20 bills, placed them on the bench with trembling fingers. $200, she said. 5 shots. Standard B-27 silhouette target at 7 yards. If I miss even 1 shot outside the red bullseye ring, I take my money and leave. You can have lane 7, but if all 5 shots land inside the red, you pay me $200. And you apologize to Vivian for being rude. Garrett stared at the money, then at Maggie, then at his friends. Colton was grinning. Dude, that's easy money. Look at her hands. Preston nodded. She can barely hold the gun steady. Thaddeus pulled out his wallet. Hell, I'm in. Easy 200. Garrett hesitated. Something in his grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. Something about respecting your elders, about not underestimating people. But then he looked at Maggie again, saw the thick glasses, the trembling hands, the cardigan sweater, an old woman who probably came to the range once a month to remember when her husband was alive. He pulled out his wallet, counted out $200 in crisp 20s, slammed them down next to Maggie's worn bills. You're on, he said, but make it quick. I've got lunch plans. Maggie nodded, picked up her 1911. It looked enormous in her shaking hands. The slide was worn smooth from decades of being racked. The barrel showed faint copper streaks from thousands of bullets. Dutch hit the button to send a fresh target downrange. 7 yards. The B-27 silhouette appeared white paper against the backstop. The red bullseye was maybe 3 inches wide. Maggie pulled out a magazine, started loading it with slow, deliberate movements. Each point, 4 or 5 ACP rounds slid in with a soft click. Her hands shook. She dropped one round. It rolled across the concrete. Preston laughed, tried to cover it with a cough, failed. 5 rounds loaded. Maggie inserted the magazine. Reach for the slide. Wait, Garrett said. You need help racking it. That slide spring looks pretty stiff for the slide racked. Sharp, clean. The sound echoed through the range like a hammer on an anvil. Maggie stood at the low ready position, pistol pointed at a 45-degree angle toward the floor. Her posture was wrong, too hunched, too uncertain. Ready when you are, ma'am, Garrett said. Just try not to have a heart attack from the recoil. His friends chuckled. Even some shooters in other lanes were watching now. The old woman in the cardigan, the young bucks in their tactical gear. This would be good for a laugh. Maggie took a breath, and something changed. It was subtle. So subtle that if you blinked, you'd miss it. But the stoop in her shoulders vanished. The uncertain shuffle became a planted stance. Feet shoulder-width apart. Weight forward. Elbows locked into a structure that looked less like human arms and more like a gun mount machined from steel. The tremor in her hands stopped. Just stopped. As if it had never been there at all. Before I shoot, Maggie said, and her voice was different too. Still soft, but with an edge underneath. Let me tell you why I never miss. Garrett frowned. Lady, we don't need a Quantico, Virginia, 1972. I was 22 years old. Dutch straightened. His eyes went wide. First woman ever permitted to attend Marine Corps Scout Sniper Basic Course. 51 men in the class. Every single one of them convinced I'd wash out on day one. The instructors thought it was a joke, a publicity stunt. They made that very clear. Maggie's grip on the pistol shifted. Fingers indexed perfectly, thumb riding high on the safety. The final qualification was a cold bore shot. One bullet, 1,000 yards, 18-mile-per-hour crosswind coming off the Chesapeake Bay. You had to read the wind, calculate the drift, account for temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, all in your head. No computers, no ballistic calculators, just you, the rifle, and the math. The range had gone completely silent now. Even the shooters in other lanes had stopped. 4 men passed on the first attempt. Out of 51. The instructors said that was about average. Then it was my turn. Maggie's eyes were distant now, seeing something that happened 54 years ago. I could feel every man watching, waiting for me to fail, to prove they were right, that women didn't belong, that I was wasting everyone's time. I chambered 1 round, M40 rifle, Federal Gold Medal match ammunition, 168 grain Sierra Match King. I settled behind the scope, watched the mirage, watched the grass moving at the target, watched the flags dancing. Her voice dropped lower, intimate, like she was sharing a secret. I didn't think about the men watching, didn't think about making history, didn't think about proving anyone wrong. I just thought about the fundamentals, the things my father taught me when I was 8 years old. Breath control, trigger press, follow through. She paused. I held half a breath, calculated 8 inches of wind drift, led the target by 3/4 of a mil, and I pressed the trigger. Another pause. Longer this time. Dead center. Perfect hit. The senior instructor walked to the scoring table, looked at my target, looked at me. He was a gunnery sergeant who'd fought in Korea. Probably never expected to say this to a woman, but he said it anyway. Maggie's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Welcome to the Brotherhood, Marine. You earned it. Garrett stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Dutch Holloway stepped forward. His voice carried across the quiet range. Gentlemen, he said, Allow me to introduce Gunnery Sergeant Margaret Callahan, United States Marine Corps retired. First female Marine Scout sniper in history. First female sniper instructor. 33 years of service. 1972 to 2005. He paused. Let that sink in. You just bet $200 against a legend. Thaddeus went pale. Preston looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Colton whispered something that might have been a prayer. Garrett just stared, his carefully constructed confidence crumbling like old concrete. Maggie smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was almost gentle. The smile of a teacher who'd seen this exact scene play out 1,000 times with 1,000 different young men. Now then, she said softly, shall I demonstrate? The tremor in her hands was gone. Her stance was perfect. The confused old woman had evaporated like morning mist, leaving behind something else. Something that had spent 5 decades mastering the art of precision. Whenever you're ready, Dutch said. He moved to the timer. Reset it. On your command, Sergeant. Maggie raised the pistol. The movement was smooth, economical. No wasted motion. The front sight found the target, settled, steadied. She took a breath, half breath, just like at Quantico, just like she'd taught hundreds of students, just like her body had learned to do without thinking after 53 years of practice. Go, she whispered. The sound was not 5 distinct shots. It was a single continuous roar. A tearing, ripping sound like canvas being shredded by industrial machinery. The 1911 cycled so fast that the brass casings were still tumbling through the air, forming a perfect golden arc before the last one had even left the chamber. Smoke poured from the barrel. The smell of burned powder filled the range. The slide locked back on an empty magazine. Complete silence. Maggie stood perfectly still, the gun motionless in her hands. She lowered it slowly, mechanically, dropped the magazine, locked the slide back, set the pistol on the bench with the reverence of someone handling something sacred. Her hands were shaking again, the tremor back like it had never left. She adjusted her glasses, shuffled slightly, the old woman returning. Garrett stared at the target downrange, started laughing. It was a desperate sound, relief mixed with disbelief. You missed, he said. I heard 5 bangs, or, well, it sounded like 1 bang, but look at the target. There's only 1 hole. He pointed. From the firing line, it did look like a single hole, slightly larger than normal. Dead center of the red bullseye, but definitely just 1 hole. You threw 4 rounds into the dirt, Garrett continued. He was reaching for the money. The bet was 5 in the red. You got 1. Thanks for the lunch money. Wait, Dutch's voice cut through the air like a blade. Check the backstop. He hit the button. The electric motor hummed. The target carrier began its journey back toward the firing line. Slowly, deliberately. Garrett's smile faded as the target grew closer. Something was wrong. The hole wasn't round. It was ragged, torn. The paper around it was charred, burned. The target arrived at the bench with a soft click. Dutch picked it up, held it to the light, pointed with 1 finger at the hole. Count the tears, he said quietly. Garrett leaned in, squinted. The hole wasn't circular. It was a cloverleaf pattern, an irregular star shape, multiple tears radiating from the center. That's, he whispered, that's impossible. 5, Dutch said. He traced each tear with his finger. 5 separate bullet holes through the exact same spot, stacked so tight they tore the paper into 1 ragged opening. He held the target up higher. The hole was smaller than a golf ball. 5.45 caliber bullets had passed through an area roughly the size of a quarter. Thaddeus stepped closer, touched the target. The burned edges, the torn paper. Nobody shoots that fast. It sounded like full auto. 0.87 seconds, Dutch said, looking at the timer. 5 shots in 0.87 seconds. That's 0.17 4-second splits. Faster than most people can pull a trigger. He looked at Maggie with something approaching awe. That's a Bill drill on steroids. That's not just expert level. That's... He trailed off. Couldn't find the words. Preston's voice was small, scared. Who is she? Dutch set the target down carefully, like it was evidence. Proof of something that shouldn't be possible, but was. Margaret Callahan, he said, 5-time winner of the Inter-Service Pistol Championship in the 1980s, 11-time national champion, Masterclass IDPA, set the record for the fastest clean El Presidente drill in 1984, 2.3 seconds. That record stood for 19 years. He paused, let each word land. When I was 19 years old and too stupid to know better, she was my instructor at Quantico. She taught me that speed means nothing without precision. That flashy gear doesn't make you a shooter. That fundamentals practiced for decades beat talent practiced for months. Dutch looked at Garrett, really looked at him. You just challenged one of the most dangerous hands in Marine Corps history to a shooting contest, and she let you off easy. If she'd wanted to embarrass you, she would have shot it one-handed. She's done that before. I've seen it. Garrett stood frozen. His face had gone from confident to confused to terrified in the space of 30 seconds. He'd just bet against someone he couldn't hope to match, had mocked someone who'd forgotten more about shooting than he'd ever learn. He reached into his wallet, pulled out the $200. His hand shook as he pushed it across the bench toward Maggie. Then he pulled out another 20, set it down separately. "What's that for?" Maggie asked. Her voice was soft again, grandmotherly. "The apology," Garrett mumbled. He couldn't meet her eyes. "For Vivian, and for you, ma'am. I'm sorry." Maggie looked at the money, at the young man who'd learned humility in the span of 1 second and 5 bullets, at his friends who stood silent and pale, suddenly aware of how little they actually knew. She picked up all the bills. $420. Walked slowly to the front desk where Vivian watched with wide eyes. There was a jar on the counter, clear plastic. Label read Wounded Warrior Project, support our veterans. Maggie stuffed every bill inside, every single one. She turned back to the four young men. They stared at her, waiting for the lecture, the gloating, the moment where she rubbed their noses in their defeat. It didn't come. Instead, she said simply, "Speed is fine, boys, but accuracy is final, and manners cost nothing. You'd do well to practice those more than your draw stroke." She shuffled back to her lane, began packing up her gear with slow, trembling hands. The old woman again, fragile, easily dismissed. But now when they looked at her, they didn't see weakness. They saw exactly what she'd always been, a warrior, a teacher, a woman who'd spent 54 years proving that skill had no gender. That age was just a number written on paper, not carved into muscle memory. That sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. Garrett watched her pack, swallowed hard. His hands were shaking now too, not from weakness, from the realization that he'd almost punched a bear and only survived because the bear had decided to teach rather than maul. Dutch walked over, put a hand on Garrett's shoulder. "Learn from this," he said quietly. "Most people don't get a lesson this gentle. Mrs. Callahan could have humiliated you, could have shot that target one-handed, eyes closed, could have made you look like a fool. Instead, she gave you a gift. A gift. She showed you what real skill looks like, what decades of dedicated practice produces, what you could become if you stopped trying to look dangerous and started trying to be competent." Dutch squeezed once, let go. "She's here every Saturday, 900. She doesn't teach anymore, hasn't in 20 years. But if you come back next week, apologize properly, and ask respectfully, she might make an exception." Garrett looked at his expensive gear, his pristine tactical vest, his $300 sunglasses. All of it suddenly felt like costume jewelry. Cheap. Fake. He looked at Maggie's worn 1911, the peeling grip tape, the finish worn down to bare metal. A gun that had probably cost $200 in 1973 and was now worth more than every piece of equipment he owned combined. Not because of its monetary value, because of what it represented. 53 years of trigger time. 53 years of fundamentals practiced until they became automatic. 53 years of showing up even when the world said you didn't belong, and proving them wrong with nothing but skill and quiet determination. Maggie finished packing, closed her case. The latches clicked shut with a finality that sounded like a door closing on an era these young men would never fully understand. She picked up the case. It trembled in her grip. She shuffled toward the exit, moving like every one of her 76 years sat heavy on her shoulders. Dutch held the door open. "Same time next week, Sergeant," he asked. "Same time, Dutch. Good shooting today." "Thank you." She paused, glanced back at the four young men standing silent in the range. "They're good boys, just need some seasoning. Want me to pass that along? If you think it'll help." She walked out into the Arizona morning. The sun was higher now, warm on her face. She put her case in the truck bed, stood there for a moment, hand on the tailgate. Her fingers weren't shaking anymore. They never really had been. Not when it mattered. Not when steel met target and fundamentals mattered more than age or gender or anything else. The tremor was real. Early stage Parkinson's, diagnosed 6 months ago. getting worse slowly but inevitably. But muscle memory ran deeper than disease. 53 years of doing something right meant your body remembered even when your nerves didn't. She climbed into the truck, started the engine. It coughed once before catching. Through the window of the range, she could see Garrett talking with his friends. Animated, gesturing, learning. Good. The world needed teachers. Needed people who'd pass on knowledge rather than hoarding it. Needed bridges between generations instead of walls. Maggie put the truck in gear, pulled out of the parking lot. Behind her, four young men were having the conversation that would change their lives. The one where they realized that everything they thought they knew was just the beginning. That real mastery took decades, not months. That the quiet professionals who let their work speak were always more dangerous than the loud ones who let their mouths run. Maggie drove home, to an empty house, to photos on the wall of a man who died 35 years ago, to daughters who called once a month out of obligation rather than love, to a life that had been full of purpose and was now full of memory. But for 0.87 seconds, she'd been 22 again, standing on a firing line at Quantico, proving that she belonged, that her hands were steady, that her eyes were sharp, that Margaret Callahan wasn't just a Marine, she was a master. And masters never really retire. They just wait for the next student to appear. Garrett Breckenridge didn't go home that night. He sat in his truck in the Copper Valley parking lot for 2 hours after the range closed, watching the sun sink behind the Catalina Mountains, replaying those 0.87 seconds in his mind like a film loop he couldn't stop. The sound, that impossible sound, not 5 distinct cracks but one continuous roar, like fabric tearing, like reality splitting open to show him something he hadn't known existed. 5 bullets through one hole. An old woman with trembling hands and thick glasses had just rewritten everything he thought he knew about shooting, about skill, about what was possible when you spent 53 years practicing fundamentals until they became deeper than bone. His phone buzzed. Text from Thaddeus: "Dude, where are you?" "We're at Buffalo Wild Wings." Garrett didn't respond. Couldn't. His mind was somewhere else. His grandfather's voice kept surfacing. Staff Sergeant Thomas Breckenridge, 101st Airborne, jumped into Normandy on D-Day when he was 19 years old, fought through France, survived the Battle of the Bulge, came home with a Bronze Star and a limp he never talked about. Garrett had been AWOL when his grandfather died, leukemia, fast and brutal, 3 months from diagnosis to funeral. But he remembered the last conversation. His grandfather in the hospital bed, skin like paper, eyes still sharp. "Boy," he'd said, voice rough from morphine, "you're gonna meet people in life who've done hard things, real things, not practice things, not gym things, real hard things that cost them." Garrett had nodded, 8 years old, not really understanding. When you meet those people, you do 2 things. You shut your mouth and you open your ears, because they earn the right to teach, and you need to earn the privilege of learning. Garrett had spent 17 years forgetting that lesson, spent them building an image, tactical gear, aggressive confidence, the appearance of capability without the foundation of competence. Maggie Callahan had spent 0.87 seconds reminding him. He started the truck, drove to Dutch's house, knocked on the door at 9 p.m. Dutch answered, raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect to see you tonight. I need to apologize, not just words, really apologize. And I need—" Garrett swallowed hard. The arrogance was gone, stripped away. Raw honesty remained. "I need to learn, if she'll teach me." Dutch studied him, saw something different than the cocky kid who'd walked into the range that morning. Something humbled, something ready. "She doesn't teach anymore," Dutch said carefully. "Hasn't taken a student in 21 years. Why not?" "She has her reasons." Dutch paused. "But if you're serious, I'll give you her address. You show up respectful, you ask once. And if she says no, you accept it like a man and walk away." "Understood." "Yes, sir." Dutch wrote the address, handed it over. "Fair warning, she's not going to make this easy. If she agrees to teach you, she'll tell you things, hard things, about what shooting actually means. What it kiss. You ready for that?" Garrett looked at the paper, at the address written in Dutch's careful handwriting. "I don't know, but I need to find out." Sunday morning came bright and hot, Arizona sun already climbing at 8 a.m. Garrett drove through Catalina foothills. Nice neighborhood, not wealthy, just settled. Houses that had been there 40 years. Native landscaping, American flags on porches. Maggie's house was small, adobe style with a red tile roof. Gravel yard. Saguaro cacti standing sentinel. A hummingbird feeder hung from the eave, tiny birds darting in iridescent flashes. The flag on her porch hung perfectly aligned despite the morning breeze. The kind of perfect that came from decades of military precision. Garrett parked on the street, walked to the door. His heart was hammering, more nervous now than he'd been facing her at the range. He knocked 3 times, firm but not aggressive. Footsteps inside, slow, deliberate, the shuffle he recognized. The door opened. Maggie stood there in faded Levi's and a University of Arizona sweatshirt, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile. The cardigan and thick sweater were gone. Just a woman in her 70s, lines around her eyes, age spots on her hands. But those eyes, they saw everything. "Mr. Breckenridge," she said. Her voice was steady, unsurprised, like she'd known he would come. "I wondered if you'd show up." "Ma'am, I came to apologize, really apologize." The rehearsed speech evaporated. Truth remained. "I was disrespectful, arrogant, cruel, and wrong about everything." She looked at him for a long moment. "Come in." The living room was spare, clean, a couch that had seen 20 years of use, a coffee table with water rings, bookshelves filled with military manuals and memoirs. Tom Clancy, Larry Bond, W.E.B. Griffin. But the walls told the story. Photos everywhere, chronological. A young woman in dress blues, standing at attention, sergeant stripes visible. Had to be early 70s based on the uniform style. Another photo. Same woman, maybe 30. Desert camouflage. M40 rifle across her back. Standing with a group of hard-looking Marines outside a bombed building. Beirut, Garrett thought. Had to be. More photos, training ranges, award ceremonies. A whole wall dedicated to graduating classes. Hundreds of faces. All Marines, all learning from the woman who now shuffled to the kitchen to pour coffee. But one photo dominated. Above the mantel, larger than the rest, a Marine pilot in a flight suit, maybe 40. Handsome in that weathered way career military men got. Captain's bars on his shoulders. Standing next to an F/A-18 Hornet. The smile was genuine, confident. The smile of a man who loved what he did. "My husband," Maggie said, returning with 2 mugs. Black coffee, no sugar. "Jack Callahan, Marine aviator, died over Iraq in 1991. The date hit Garrett like a punch. Operation Desert Storm. Yes. She handed him the coffee, sat in the chair across from him. Shot down by a surface-to-air missile south of Basra, February 3rd, 1991. He was 41 years old. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "So am I, every day." She looked at the photo. Something in her expression softened. "But that's not why you came." "No, ma'am, I came because—" Garrett set down the coffee. Needed to say this right. "My grandfather was Thomas Breckenridge, Staff Sergeant, 101st Airborne. He jumped into Normandy on D-Day." Maggie's eyebrows rose. "Breckenridge. I knew a Tom Breckenridge, marksmanship instructor at Camp Pendleton around 2005. About 60 then." "That was him. He retired and—" Garrett's voice caught. "He died when I was 8. I barely remember him, but I remember the last thing he told me." He repeated his grandfather's words. About people who'd done hard things, about shutting your mouth and opening your ears. "I spent 17 years doing the opposite," Garrett said. "Talking loud, looking dangerous, wearing the costume. And yesterday you showed me what real skill looks like, what 53 years of dedication produces." Maggie sipped her coffee. "What do you want, Garrett?" "I want you to teach me, not just how to shoot fast, how to understand, the way you understand. I'm 76 years old. I have Parkinson's disease. In a year, maybe 2, I won't be able to hold a rifle steady. Why would I waste that time on someone who mocked me?" The bluntness stung, but it was fair. "Because my grandfather would want me to learn from someone like you. Because I'm tired of being all show and no substance. Because—" he met her eyes. "Because you have knowledge that will die with you if you don't pass it on. And that would be a waste." Silence. Long enough that Garrett thought she was about to say no. Then Maggie stood, walked to a closet, pulled out a cardboard box, old, worn, marked USMC Personal. She brought it back, set it on the coffee table, opened it. Inside were photographs, documents, campaign ribbons still in their cases, a folded flag, letters with military postal service stamps. She pulled out a photo, handed it to Garrett, a younger Maggie, maybe 33, desert camouflage, M40 rifle, standing with about 20 Marines outside a partially collapsed concrete building. The photo quality was grainy, 80s film stock, but the exhaustion on every face was clear. October 1983, Maggie said. Beirut, Lebanon. 2 days after the barracks bombing. Garrett looked closer, saw the rubble in the background, the twisted rebar, the Marines with thousand-yard stares. If I teach you, Maggie continued, it won't be just shooting mechanics. It'll be stories. Things I've never told anyone outside the Marines who were there. Because you can't understand fundamentals without understanding what they're for, what they cost, what they enable. She looked at him. You ready for that? Yes, ma'am. Even the hard parts, especially those. Maggie nodded slowly. Then let me tell you about Beirut. She settled back into her chair. Her voice took on a different quality. Not storytelling, remembering, living it again. October 23rd, 1983. Sunday morning. 06:22 local time. Maggie had been at the rifle range, 2 miles from the airport, 2 miles from the 4-story concrete building that housed the 1st Battalion 8th Marines. 241 men sleeping in their racks, dreaming of home, of girlfriends, of cold beer and mom's cooking. She'd been setting up morning qualifications, checking targets, making notes on her clipboard about which Marines needed remedial training. The explosion arrived as sound first, a deep bass rumble that shook the ground, then light, a fireball rising into the pre-dawn sky, orange and black and angry, then screaming on the radio nets. All units, mass casualty event at BLT headquarters. Building collapse. All hands respond immediately. Maggie had grabbed her rifle, her aid bag, jumped in the first vehicle heading toward the smoke. The drive took 4 minutes. 4 minutes that felt like 4 hours. Watching the smoke column grow, hearing the chaos on the radio, voices shouting, crying, calling for corpsmen, for chaplains, for anyone. When they arrived, the building was gone. Not damaged, gone. 4 stories compressed into 15 feet of twisted rebar and pulverized concrete. The truck bomb had been massive, 12,000 pounds of TNT equivalent. Drove right through the barrier, detonated in the lobby. The building had pancaked, floors collapsing onto each other, crushing everyone inside. Marines were already digging. Bare hands, shovels, anything. Pulling at concrete slabs that weighed tons. Blood everywhere, the smell of diesel fuel, of death, of concrete dust that coated everything and everyone. Ma'am, a corporal grabbed her. Henderson, her spotter. Sniper team, we need overwatch. Make sure hostiles don't hit us while we're digging. Maggie had looked at the rubble, wanted to dig, wanted to pull bodies out. Her Marines, her students. But she had a job. Where, she asked. Rooftop, 300 yards northwest. Good sight lines. They'd climbed, set up position. M40 rifle, loopholed scope, 20 rounds of federal gold medal match ammunition. Everything was covered in concrete dust. The scope, her uniform, her hands, her lungs. She settled in, started scanning, watching windows, rooftops, anywhere a hostile could set up. Below, the digging continued, frantic, desperate. They'd pulled out 17 bodies in the first hour, all dead, crushed, some barely recognizable. The sun rose, heat built. The Marines kept digging. Maggie kept watching. 48 hours later, they were still digging, still pulling out bodies. The count was 218 confirmed dead, more missing, probably dead. No one had slept. No one had eaten much, running on rage and determination and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, someone down there was still alive. October 25th, dawn. Maggie was still on that rooftop, different building now, better angle, watching the rescue site. Henderson ranged targets, called out movements. They'd seen hostile activity, snipers, opportunists, people who wanted to take advantage of the chaos. That's when she saw it, a window. Top floor of a damaged apartment building, 760 yards away. Movement, a rifle barrel, pointing down at the rescue site. Contact, she whispered. Window, 10 o'clock, 760 yards. Henderson glassed it. I see him. He's got an angle on the rescue team. The radio crackled. Sniper fire at the dig site, taking casualties. Below, Marines dove for cover. But there wasn't much cover, just rubble and desperation. The rescue team had been working for 6 hours straight. They'd found a pocket, an air gap beneath a collapsed stairwell. 14 Marines, trapped, alive, barely. They were minutes away from breaking through, Minutes from pulling them out, now they were pinned. Anyone who moved got shot at. The hostile sniper had the perfect angle, could see everything. Range, Maggie said, 760, wind 3 to 5 left to right. Variable. Maggie felt the building beneath them shift. It had been damaged in the blast, unstable. Every time someone moved debris below, the whole structure swayed. I can't get stable, Henderson said. This building's moving. Maggie settled behind the rifle, felt it, the subtle movement, the sway. At 760 yards, subtle meant missing by feet. She watched through the scope, saw the hostile fire again. Muzzle flash, the crack of the shot arriving seconds later. Someone screamed below. The math was brutal, simple but brutal. She had to take the shot, unstable platform or not, because 14 Marines would die in that pocket if the rescue team couldn't reach them, and the team couldn't move while pinned. She thought about Quantico, about her first qualification shot, about breathing, about fundamentals. You can't control the environment. You can only control yourself. She slowed her breathing, felt her heartbeat, timed it, found the pause between beats when the body was stillest, waited for the building to settle, just for a second. The reticle danced across the target. The hostile sniper was partially obscured. She could see the rifle, part of a shoulder. No headshot, no center mass, just a shoulder, maybe 12 inches of target. The building swayed. The reticle wandered, came back, wandered again. She waited, patient, the way her father had taught her, hunting jackrabbits in New Mexico. Don't chase the shot, Maggie girl. Let the shot come to you. The building settled. The reticle steadied. She held half a breath, calculated. 760, Federal 100 to 68 grain, 2.3 mils elevation, zero point 0.4 left for wind. The reticle found the shoulder. Centered, she pressed, smooth, straight back, no jerk. The rifle cracked. Recoil punched her shoulder. She stayed in the scope, watched. 760 yards away, the hostile jerked, fell backward into darkness. The rifle clattered from the window. Henderson was on the radio. Hostile down, rescue team, you're clear to work. Below, Marines moved, fast, frantic, racing time in physics and collapsing rubble. 9 minutes later, they broke through. 14 Marines, pulled out one by one, covered in concrete dust, dehydrated, some injured, but breathing. All 14 survived the extraction, got medevac to Germany, to hospitals, to recovery. Maggie never learned their names, never saw their faces clearly, just dust-covered shapes on stretchers, loaded into helicopters. Gone. Some recovered, boy, some didn't. War made no promises, but they got their chance. Because of one shot, on a building that swayed, at dawn, while concrete dust filled the air and 218 bodies lay in temporary morgue. Maggie finished, looked at Garrett. He was staring at the photo, at the young woman with the rifle, trying to connect her to the old woman sitting across from him. That's not in any official record, Maggie said quietly. No medal, no commendation, just a line in someone's after-action report. Sniper support provided, one hostile eliminated. Garrett's voice was rough. You saved 14 people. I did my job. That's all. She paused. But that's what I learned in Beirut. It's not about me. It's about them. The Marines who needed cover fire, who needed someone to make an impossible shot so they could do their job. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the desert. That shot taught me responsibility, Garrett. I held a man's life at 760 yards. I took it, quickly, cleanly, because it meant 14 of ours got to keep theirs. She turned back. That's the weight. That's what fundamentals carry. Not paper targets, not scoring rings. Life and death, made in fractions of seconds. Consequences that last forever. The room was quiet. Just the hum of the AC, the distant sound of traffic. Garrett couldn't speak. His throat was tight. There are more stories, Maggie said. Harder ones, if you want to hear them. I do. Then come back next Saturday. Bring your friends. I'll tell you about Tate, the real cost, the kind that doesn't heal. He left. Maggie stood at the window, watching his truck disappear. She hadn't told that story in 33 years. The weight of it was still heavy. Carrying it alone had been easier than sharing. But something about Garrett reminded her of the young Marines she'd taught. Cocky on the surface, searching underneath, needing guidance but too proud to ask until someone showed them what real looked like. Saturday came. All 4 of them showed up. Garrett, Thaddeus, Colton, Preston. No tactical gear, just plain clothes. They looked younger without the costume. More honest. Dutch had given them lane 7. Maggie was already there. Same worn 1911. Same steady hands when it mattered. Good morning, ma'am, Garrett said. Different now. Respect earned rather than demanded. Good morning, gentlemen, Maggie gestured to the benches. Before we shoot, there's another story. The hardest one. About cost. They sat. 4 young men ready to learn. Maggie took a breath. This one still hurt. Probably always would. February 3rd, 1991. I was at Quantico, teaching advanced sniper course. 41 students. Her voice was steady, but underneath, something fragile trembled. I was in the classroom, middle of a lesson on environmental factors. Wind reading at extended range, technical work, the kind that takes years to master. She paused, remembering. The chalkboard, the equations, the students taking notes. 3 officers walked in. I knew immediately. The way you know when something fundamental is about to break, when the world is about to change shape. Her hands clenched. They didn't have to say anything. I knew. The 4 young men leaned forward. Captain Jack Callahan, Marine FA-18 pilot, my husband, shot down over southern Iraq, surface-to-air missile. He ejected, survived the crash. Her voice went quieter, harder. But he was in hostile territory, no backup, no quick reaction force available. By the time they could organize a rescue, it was too late. She looked at Jack's photo on the wall. They found his body 3 days later. He'd fought, killed 2 hostiles before they got him. That was Jack. Never went easy. Thaddeus's voice was soft. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. He was 41. I was 41. Our daughters were 12 and 9, Emily and Rebecca. Suddenly, I was a widow. Suddenly, their father was a folded flag and a name on a memorial wall. She breathed, in, out, the way she'd taught thousands of students to breathe before taking a shot. The Corps offered me retirement, full pension, honorable discharge. Take care of your girls, they said. You've given enough. You've done enough. Her fists clenched tighter. I sat at the funeral, watched them present the flag, heard the rifles fire, heard taps echo across Arlington, and I wanted to quit. God, I wanted to quit. Wanted to go home. Wanted to be done with service, with sacrifice, with everything that had just cost me the man I loved. She looked at them, direct, unflinching. But Jack wouldn't want that. He'd want me to finish the mission, to not waste his sacrifice by quitting. Her voice strengthened. So 3 days after the funeral, I went back, stood in front of those 41 students. My eyes were red, my hands were shaking, everything in me screamed to run. But I taught because that's what Marines do. We complete the mission. Preston wiped his eyes. How, ma'am? How did you do it? By remembering why it mattered. Those 41 students would deploy, would face hostile fire, would need every skill I could teach them. If I quit, some of them might die because I wasn't there to teach them the thing that would save their life. She paused, let that sink in. So I stayed, taught for 14 more years, graduated 800 more students. Many deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, places Jack never saw, places he helped protect even after he was gone. Her voice broke slightly, and some of them wrote me letters, years later. Said the training saved them. Said the fundamentals I taught made the difference when everything went wrong. Jack didn't get to come back, but his sacrifice meant I stayed, and my staying meant others came home to their families, to their daughters, to their lives. She stood. That's cost, gentlemen. Real cost. The kind that takes everything and never gives it back. But you carry it anyway, because the mission is larger than any one person. The range was silent. Maggie walked to her rifle, picked it up. Now let me tell you about changing the world, one student at a time. The next story was different, lighter, triumphant against odds. 1994, Maggie was 44, Master Sergeant, still teaching despite the grief, despite Emily and Rebecca growing distant, despite the empty house and the empty bed. The Marine Corps had officially opened combat roles to women. Policy changed, reality lagged. Women could serve, but they faced resistance, doubt, the constant burden of proving themselves worthy of opportunities men received by default. Maggie had an idea, controversial, risky, but necessary. An all-female scout sniper course, not to separate, to demonstrate, to prove women could not only meet the standard, but exceed it when taught properly. She proposed it up the chain. The response was skeptical. Waste of resources, one colonel said. Women don't have the upper body strength for extended prone positions. They don't have the patience, another claimed. They don't have the killer instinct. Maggie smiled. That smile Garrett now recognized. The one that said, watch me prove you wrong. She designed the curriculum, modified it, not lowering standards, adapting methods. Women had different physiology, different leverage points, different strengths. She taught physics instead of force, showed how proper body mechanics negated the need for raw muscle, how breath control and mental discipline mattered more than bench press numbers. 9 women volunteered for the first class, all Marines, all already excelling in their fields, all carrying the weight of representation. The male instructors watched, arms crossed, some supportive, many skeptical, waiting for failure to confirm their biases. Week 1 was brutal, not because the women couldn't perform, because Maggie pushed harder, demanded more, gave no quarter. You're not representing just yourselves, she told them on day 1. You're representing every woman who'll come after. Every girl told she can't. Every Marine who faces doubt because of her gender. You fail, they use it as proof. You succeed, you open doors. The pressure was immense, unfair, but real. By week 3, something shifted. 2 male instructors who'd been most skeptical started helping, teaching alongside Maggie. They'd watch the women adapt, learn, excel. Ma'am, one sergeant said privately, I was wrong. I thought they couldn't do it. But Corporal Hayes just outshot me at 800 yards. In wind, I couldn't read. Maggie just nodded. Keep teaching, Sergeant. They need your expertise as much as mine. By week 6, the women were outperforming average male classes. Higher accuracy scores. Better teamwork, more consistent under pressure. The final exercise was a 48-hour field problem. Stalk, observe, report. Engage targets at unknown distances in variable conditions. All 9 women completed it. 8 passed with scores that would have been top tier in any class. Graduation day, March 1995. The brass who'd called it a waste showed up, saw the scores posted, 88.9% pass rate. Male class average was 73%. No one said much, didn't have to, numbers spoke louder than opinions. Over the next decade, Maggie's program graduated 180 female scout snipers. They deployed worldwide. Fallujah, Ramadi, Helmand proved themselves in combat, opened doors, saved lives, not because they were women, because they were Marines who met the standard and often exceeded on it. That's legacy, Maggie told the 4 young men. Not personal glory, not revenge against doubters. Building systems that lift others, creating opportunities for those who come after. She looked at them. You want to matter, be so good they can't ignore you. Then use that excellence to help others climb. That's how you change the world. Garrett stood. Ma'am, I want that, to be good enough to matter that way. Then we start Monday, 0600, no fancy gear, just you and the willingness to fail until you succeed. We'll be here. I know, she smiled. You're not the first cocky young men I've taught. Won't be the last. But if you listen, you might be the ones who carry it forward. They left, different than they'd arrived, carrying new weight, new understanding. Dutch watched them go, looked at Maggie. You sure about teaching again? No, she admitted. But Jack would say I'm wasting good knowledge keeping it to myself. And he'd be right. You miss him. Every day, but he's here, in every student, every lesson. That's the thing about legacy, Dutch. It outlives us. If we build it right. She packed her gear. 53 years of ritual. 53 years of muscle memory. But something had shifted. Monday was coming. With it, purpose, the kind that came from passing torches, from being needed again. She drove home. The desert sun, high and hot, unforgiving, like Beirut, like every place she'd served, but also persistent, surviving, adapting, like her, like the knowledge she carried, like the legacy she'd build, one student at a time, until her hands couldn't hold steady anymore. And even then her words would remain, her lessons, her stories, her proof, waiting for the next generation to pick them up and carry forward. Monday came, then Tuesday, then a week, then a month. Garrett and his friends showed up every morning at 600. No excuses, no complaints, rain or shine or 100-degree heat. Maggie taught them the way she'd been taught, slowly, methodically, building from foundation up. No shortcuts, no tricks, just fundamentals, repeated until they became automatic. By week 3, Garrett could call his shots. By week 5, Thaddeus could read wind by watching grass movement. By week 7, they were shooting groups that would have embarrassed their former selves. But there were still 2 stories left, 2 lessons Maggie hadn't shared. She waited, watching, making sure they were ready. Because the next story wasn't about triumph. It was about what happens when everything you trust fails. When technology breaks down and only experience remains. When being old means being the only one who remembers how things worked before computers did the thinking. It was a Saturday morning in late March. The four young men had been training for 6 weeks. They'd earned the next lesson. Maggie set down her rifle, looked at them. Afghanistan, she said, March 2003. I was 53 years old. They leaned in, ready. The deployment had been controversial. Maggie was a gunnery sergeant, senior instructor. Too valuable to risk in theater, the brass said. Too old, the younger Marines whispered. But the request came directly from Recon Battalion. They needed someone who could teach advanced techniques in country. Someone who'd seen combat. Someone the young snipers would respect. Someone who could bridge the gap between classroom theory and battlefield reality. Maggie volunteered. Emily and Rebecca were adults, 24 and 21, both in college, both distant. Calls on birthdays, cards at Christmas. The relationship had never recovered from Jack's death, from all those years when Mom chose the Corps over being home. So Maggie deployed, Helmand Province, embedded with 2nd Reconnaissance Battalion. Her job was simple: observe, advise, teach, not to fight. She was an instructor, an observer, gray hair at the temples, reading glasses in her pocket, old enough to be mother to most of the Marines there, but she still carried her rifle, M40A3, the newest iteration, equipped with a ballistic computer, digital rangefinder, wind sensors, technology that could calculate a shot faster than any human. The young snipers loved it. Plug in the data, the computer spits out the solution. Point and shoot. Maggie was skeptical. She'd learned to shoot when computers filled entire rooms, when calculations happened in your head or on a notepad, when you read wind by watching Mirage and feeling it on your face. But she kept quiet. Times change. Technology advances. Maybe the old ways weren't needed anymore. Then came the ambush, March 17th, 2003. 6 Marines from Recon pinned down by Taliban fighters, caught in a dry riverbed. No cover. 50 yards from safety, but might as well have been miles. The hostile fighters were in a compound, elevated position, good cover, pouring fire down on the trapped Marines. Maggie's team was 1,340 yards away, on a ridgeline. Good position for observation. Not great for engagement at that range, but it was what they had. The young sniper next to her was Corporal Danny Reeves, 22 years old, excellent shot, top of his class, completely dependent on the ballistic computer strapped to his rifle. He ranged the target, 1,340 yards, elevation 212 feet above target. Plugged the data into the computer. Waited. The screen flickered, displayed the solution, then flashed red. Error. Wind variance exceeds parameters. Shot probability 4%, not recommended. Reeves stared at the screen. Ma'am, the computer says it's impossible. Wind's too variable. Maggie looked downrange, saw the dust devils dancing, saw the heat shimmer, saw the way the wind bent the sparse vegetation in conflicting patterns. The wind wasn't consistent. It was chaos, gusting from different directions at different elevations. The kind of wind that made computers give up and humans pray. Below, one of the trapped Marines was hit. She saw him go down. Saw the others trying to pull him to cover. That didn't exist. How long until they reach those Marines? Maggie asked. QRF is 12 minutes out, maybe less. How long can they hold? Reeves glassed the scene. His voice went tight. 2 are wounded. They're exposed, taking fire from multiple positions. They've got maybe 5 minutes before someone dies. Maggie looked at her own rifle. Same M40A3, same ballistic computer. But she also had something the computer didn't. 31 years of reading wind without electronics, of watching grass and dust and mirage, of feeling patterns instead of calculating them. She'd learned to shoot in New Mexico, where wind came off the desert in waves, where her father taught her to watch tumbleweed and listen to the sound it made in the brush. She'd refined it at Quantico, where instructors made her estimate wind speed within 2 miles per hour or run extra miles. She'd proven it in Beirut, on an unstable platform, when everything said the shot was impossible, and she'd taught it to 800 students, drilled it until they could read wind in their sleep. Technology was a tool, a good tool, but tools break, batteries die, screens crack, knowledge persisted. Give me the rifle, Maggie said. Reeves hesitated. Ma'am, you heard the computer. 4% probability. That's basically zero. The computer's never been to New Mexico. She took his rifle, settled into position. Bipod legs dug into the rocky soil, looked through the scope, saw the target. A man firing an AK-47 from a window, 600 meters, call it 1,340 yards. Felt the wind on her face. Left to right, no. Right to left, no. Both. Swirling, unpredictable. She watched the dust, saw it lift, settle, lift again. Different directions, different speeds. Chaos. But chaos had patterns if you knew how to see them. She closed her eyes, listened. The wind made sound. High whistle meant fast. Low moan meant slow. Multiple sounds meant multiple layers. Her father's voice in her memory. Feel it, Maggie girl. Don't think it. Feel it. She opened her eyes, watched the mirage through the scope. The heat shimmer distorted everything. But the distortion had rhythm, waves like water. She timed them, counted, found the pattern. Every 8 seconds, a pause. When the competing winds canceled each other out, 2.8 seconds of relative calm. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She dialed elevation, 1,340 yards, M118LR ammunition. That was straightforward. Gravity didn't change. Wind was the variable. She calculated, not with numbers, with experience, with pattern recognition built over 3 decades. 3 mils left. Number 4, number split the difference. 3.5. She settled, controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow, watched the mirage, timed the pattern. 8 seconds, 7, 6, 5. The pause was coming. 4, 3, 2. The mirage settled. The competing winds neutralized each other. The natural lull between gusts. She held half a breath, pressed the trigger. The rifle cracked. Recoil drove into her shoulder. She stayed in the scope. 1,340 yards away, the hostile fighter jerked backward. Dropped. The AK clattered to the floor. Silence on the ridge. Reeves was staring. How did you experience, Maggie said quietly. She handed back his rifle. The computer calculates, but it doesn't feel, doesn't recognize patterns, doesn't have 31 years of watching wind do impossible things. Below, the trapped Marines moved, fast, covered the distance to safety. All 6 extracted. The wounded Marine survived. Later back at base, the tech specialists examined the ballistic computer, ran the data, confirmed the wind conditions. The algorithm was right, the tech said. Shot probability was 4%, basically impossible. Then he looked at the after-action report, saw the confirmation, 1 shot, 1 hit, 1,340 yards in impossible wind. He updated the algorithm, added new parameters. Wind pattern recognition, experience factors, things that couldn't be quantified but existed nonetheless. The computer learned from Maggie's shot, but it still couldn't replicate it, because some knowledge can't be programmed. It can only be earned. Maggie finished the story. The 4 young men sat silent. Preston spoke first. You're saying technology isn't enough. I'm saying technology is a tool, a good tool, but it's not a substitute for knowledge, for experience, for the kind of pattern recognition that comes from doing something 10,000 times until your brain sees things computers can't. She stood, stretched. Her back ached. 53 had felt young in Afghanistan. 76 felt old in Arizona. There's one more story, she said. The hardest one, about what happens after. They waited. Maggie's voice changed, softer, more fragile. I retired in 2005. I was 55 years old, 33 years of service, eligible for full pension. The new generation of instructors was good, better than good. They didn't need me anymore. She paused. So I came here, to Tucson, bought a small house, thought I'd enjoy retirement, travel, spend time with my daughters, finally be a grandmother. Her hands trembled. But Emily lives in Seattle, Rebecca in Boston. They're busy, important careers. Emily's a lawyer, Rebecca's a doctor. They call on birthdays, send cards at Christmas. The pain in her voice was quiet but deep. They've never forgiven me for choosing the Corps over them, for going back to work 3 days after their father died, for missing dance recitals and graduations because I was deploying, for being a Marine first and a mother second. She looked at them. I don't blame them. I made my choices. Choices have consequences. Thaddeus shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, they should understand. You were serving. They understand intellectually, but understanding isn't the same as forgiving, isn't the same as wanting me in their lives. She walked to the window, looked out at the range. For 21 years, I've been invisible. Nobody sees an old woman with shaking hands. Nobody sees the instructor, the sniper, the Marine. They see someone who should be home knitting. Someone passed her expiration date. Her voice broke slightly. I come here every Saturday. Not because I need to shoot, because for 1 hour holding this rifle, I remember who I was, what I could do, before age made me invisible. Garrett stood, walked to her. You're not invisible to us. Maggie smiled sadly. You didn't see me either. Not at first. You saw an old woman, weak, confused, easy to dismiss. We were wrong. Yes, but most people never find out they're wrong. They just keep seeing what they expect. And I keep being invisible. She turned back to them. That's the last lesson. About legacy. About what happens when you give everything to something and then it's over. When your purpose ends but you're still here. Still breathing, still existing, but not mattering. The silence was heavy. Do you matter now? Colton asked quietly. Maggie looked at the four of them. Young men who'd been arrogant and were now humble. Who'd come every morning for 6 weeks. Who were learning not just to shoot, but why shooting mattered. I'm starting to, she said. Teaching you, passing this on. It's not the same as active duty, but it's something, it's purpose. She straightened, the fragility lifted. The instructor returned, which brings us to today, to the original bet, to showing you that age is just a number written on paper, not carved into muscle memory. They walked back to lane 7. Dutch was waiting. He'd set up a fresh target, 7 yards, B-27 silhouette. The range had filled. Word had spread. The old woman who shot 5 bullets through 1 hole. People wanted to see it again. 20 spectators lined the observation area, some skeptical, some curious, all watching. Maggie checked her 1911, loaded 5 rounds. Her hands shook badly, worse than usual. The Parkinson's was progressing, 6 months since diagnosis. The neurologist had said it would get worse slowly. He was right. Dutch saw it, leaned close. Maggie, your hands. Are you sure about this? No, she admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. Garrett and his friends stood behind her, supporting, believing. She turned to face them. Before I shoot, I need you to understand something. This tremor is real. Parkinson's disease. Early stage, getting worse. In a year, maybe 2, I won't be able to hold a rifle steady anymore. Their faces fell. But right now in this moment, I'm going to show you what 53 years of fundamentals look like. What happens when you practice something so long, your body remembers even when your nerves don't. She turned to the target, raised the pistol. The tremor made it wobble, visibly, undeniably. Then she shifted her stance, and everything changed. Weight forward, elbows locked, shoulders squared, the architecture of perfect shooting position, built over 5 decades. Maintained through muscle memory so deep it bypassed conscious thought. The tremor didn't stop, but it didn't matter. The fundamentals were stronger than the disease. Go, she said. The sound was immediate, continuous. A single tearing roar that lasted less than 2 seconds. 5 shots. So fast they became one sound. The brass casings were still airborne when the slide locked back. Smoke hung in the air, the smell of burned powder. Complete silence. Dutch brought the target in. Everyone leaned close. 1 hole, ragged, torn, burned at the edges. 5 bullets, through the same spot, smaller than a quarter. But that wasn't the shocking part. Last 3 rounds, Maggie said quietly. I shot with my eyes closed. Garrett stared. That's impossible. No, it's just 53 years of muscle memory. Your body learns the position, the trigger press, the recoil management. Do it enough times and you don't need to see. You just need to trust. She opened the action. Cleared the weapon. Set it down. Her hands were shaking again, badly. She looked exhausted. Older than 76, but her eyes were bright, alive. Garrett approached, held out $400, the original bet plus his contribution. Ma'am, you earned this. Maggie looked at the money, then at the 4 young men, then at the crowd watching. She walked to the front desk. Vivian watched with tears in her eyes. The Wounded Warrior Project jar sat on the counter. Maggie stuffed all $400 inside. For the ones who couldn't come home, she said. She turned to Garrett. You asked me to teach you. I have. But the real teaching starts now. Because knowing how to shoot is nothing compared to knowing why. We understand. Do you... Eesh. She looked at all four of them. Then prove it. Start a program. Teach others. Pass this forward. Don't let it die with my generation. Garrett nodded. We will. I promise. Maggie smiled. The first genuine smile in years. Then my work here is done. 3 months later, May 2026, Saturday morning, Copper Valley Range. The sign outside had changed. Callahan Fundamentals Program. Free instruction for veterans, active duty, and respectful civilians. Saturdays 800 to 1200. 18 students filled lanes 5 through 7. Mix of ages. Veterans with gray hair, young recruits, 2 women, 1 teenager brought by his father. Maggie walked the line, observing, correcting, teaching. But she wasn't teaching alone. Garrett moved between students, his voice echoing lessons Maggie had taught. Feel the weapon. Don't fight it. Fundamentals first. Speed later. Thaddeus ran the safety briefing. Colton managed the targets. Preston handled sign-ups and scheduling. Vivian had been promoted to full-range safety officer, trained by Maggie herself. Dutch coordinated everything. Proud, watching his teacher teach a new generation. The program had grown, started with 4 students, now 18. Next month, they'd need more lanes. People were coming, veterans who remembered the old ways, young shooters who wanted to learn properly, word spreading. Maggie Callahan was teaching again. And she wasn't invisible anymore. She finished correcting a student's grip, looked up, saw a woman standing at the observation window, 47 years old, professional clothes, uncertain expression. Emily. Maggie's breath caught. She walked over slowly, pushed through the door to the observation area. Hi, Mom. Emily's voice was shaky. I saw the news story about your program, about you teaching. You came. I came. Emily looked past her mother at the range, at the students learning, at Garrett demonstrating proper stance. I didn't know you were doing this, that you were alive like this. I wasn't, not for 21 years, but now you found your purpose again. I found students who needed teaching. Maggie paused. And I realized I was wasting good knowledge by keeping it to myself. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Dad would be proud. I hope so. I'm proud too. Emily's voice broke. I'm sorry it took me this long to see it, to see you, really see you. Maggie reached out, took her daughter's hand, the first physical contact in years. You're here now. That's what matters. I want to learn, Emily said it quickly, before she could change her mind. Not just shooting, but who you were, what you did, all the things you never talked about because we never asked. It's a long story. I have time, Emily smiled, fragile but real. And Rebecca's bringing Jacob next month, your grandson. He's 16, wants to learn to shoot properly. Said his friend's dad told him about some legend named Callahan who could put 5 bullets through 1 hole. Maggie laughed, actually laughed. The sound surprised her. Then we'd better make sure the legend is worth meeting. They walked back to the range together. Mother and daughter, separated by years of choices and consequences, coming together through the thing that had driven them apart. Service, teaching, legacy. Garrett saw them, smiled, gave Maggie a thumbs up. The class continued. 18 students learning fundamentals, learning patience, learning that speed is fine, but accuracy is final. Learning that real skill takes decades, that shortcuts don't exist, that excellence is built 1 repetition at a time. And in the corner on the wall, Dutch had dedicated to the program hung a photo. Maggie Callahan, 22 years old. Quantico, 1972. Standing with her first perfect score target. First female Marine Scout sniper. Next to it, a recent photo. Maggie at 76, surrounded by 18 students. All learning, all growing. Below both photos, a plaque. Gunnery Sergeant Margaret Maggie Callahan, USMC, retired. First female Marine Scout sniper instructor. 1972 to 2005, 33 years. Service 2026 to present. Still teaching speed is fine. Accuracy is final. Teaching is forever. The morning sun streamed through the range windows, warm, bright, illuminating the space where old knowledge met new students, where invisible became essential, where legacy lived. Maggie stood among her students, teaching, guiding, passing forward what had been passed to her. Her hands still trembled. Her eyes still needed thick glasses. Her body still carried 76 years. But her knowledge was ageless, her skill timeless, her purpose renewed. She wasn't just existing anymore. She was teaching, building, creating something that would outlive her. Every student who learned proper fundamentals, every recruit who understood the weight of responsibility, every young shooter who realized excellence took time. They were her legacy, living proof that what she knew mattered, that who she'd been still had value, that age didn't erase expertise, it refined it. And as she watched Garrett teach a young Marine the same grip she'd taught him 6 months ago, Maggie understood something fundamental. She'd spent 54 years proving she belonged, proving women could shoot, proving age didn't diminish skill. But the real victory wasn't in proving. It was in passing forward, not keeping knowledge, sharing it, not hoarding expertise, multiplying it, not being the best, creating the best. That was legacy, not what you did, but what you enabled others to do, not who you were, but who you helped others become. The range grew quiet as students finished their strings of fire. Maggie walked the line one last time, checking targets, offering corrections, smiling at progress. Emily watched from the observation area, seeing her mother not as the woman who'd chosen work over family, but as the teacher who'd spent a lifetime building skills that saved lives. That changed systems. That opened doors. Understanding came late, but it came. At noon, the class ended. Students packed up, thanked Maggie, scheduled for next week. Dutch locked up. Vivian cleaned. Garrett and his friends reset the range for civilian use. Maggie sat on the bench, tired, but satisfied. Emily joined her, sat quietly. Emily said, I spent 30 years angry that you chose the Marines over us. Over Dad, over being home. Maggie nodded, didn't defend, just listened. But watching you today, seeing those students, hearing them talk about what they learned. Emily paused. I understand now. You weren't choosing the Marines over us. You were choosing to matter, to make a difference, to use what you knew to help people. I still missed your childhood. You did. Emily's voice was honest. And that hurt. Still hurts. But I'm 47 years old, and I'm finally understanding that life isn't simple, that choices have costs, that you can love people and still serve something larger. She took her mother's hand again. Dad understood. That's why he never asked you to stop, because he knew you were built for this, for teaching, for excellence, for making the world a little bit better one student at a time. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. I wish I'd known you understood. I didn't. Not until today. Not until I saw you alive again. Really alive. Not just existing. They sat together, mother and daughter, separated by decades, connected by understanding. Next week, Emily said, I want to learn, not to shoot. I mean, yes, that too. But I want to hear the stories, all of them. Beirut, Afghanistan, the cost of the victories, all of it. It's a lot. I have time, Emily smiled. We have time. Finally. Maggie nodded, unable to speak. The weight of 21 years of loneliness lifting. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not to her students, not to her daughter, not to herself. She was Margaret Callahan, gunnery sergeant, instructor, Marine, 76 years old, hands shaking with Parkinson's, eyes failing, body aging, but knowledge intact, skill preserved, purpose renewed, and legacy building. One student at a time, one story shared, one generation teaching the next, forever. The range door closed behind them as they left, the building quiet now, empty, waiting for next week. But the lessons remained, hanging in the air like gunsmoke, embedded in the walls like the memories of 10,000 shots fired. Teaching is forever, speed is fine, accuracy is final. But teaching never dies. It just gets passed forward, from master to student, from mother to daughter, from one generation to the next, carrying knowledge across time, making the invisible visible, giving purpose to those who've lost it, proving that excellence has no age limit, that skill transcends gender, that fundamentals properly taught never fail, and that legacy isn't what you achieve, it's what you enable others to achieve, long after you're gone, forever.